This session is going to cover some of the administrative configuration and kind of detailed configuration aspects of Produmex WMS. So here we are again, logged in as the manager. I'm just going to go ahead and hide the messages and alerts. So as we look at the additional menu area for Produmex, you can see that there's a number of different options and features that are contained within this menu tree. Probably the most important one that you'll have is the organizational structure. And the organizational structure is where we define quite a bit of the let's say the operating parameters for the warehouse management solution. So as we take a look here within the org structure, assigned to each SAP Business One company is a set of organizational structure entries, or commonly known as the OSE. So as we take a look, there's a lot of setup and definition that happens at the company level. And then beneath that, you have the ability to set up multiple warehouses. And within those warehouses, you can have, again, another set of structures, which are inclusive of things like zones, zones being used to group like storage areas together. I can also have subzones. So really, I do have this ability to create within the organizational structure a warehouse map that can meet nearly any need that I've seen in all my years within the warehouse management environment. We'll go in and we'll talk a little bit more about each one of these entries as we move along here. But first, at the organizational structure, kind of the top of the tree here, at the company level, we have the ability to define a number of different default parameters. So if you take a look at, there is the ability to have things like routes within the system, so delivery routes if you have your own fleet of trucks. So you're going to see references to see things like drivers and trailers and that type of thing. That has to do very much with the route portion of the WMS system. And for that route portion, I think it's probably good if we have Gilles put together a video on that section of the software. I'll touch base on it in a later video, but probably best to have him give more of a full explanation of that. So again, as we look at the general tab within the organizational structure, this is where you get the ability to be able to set some default operating type information for that particular company. What's important to understand is that you've got a lot of different interaction with SAP Business One. So as you take a look at these different parameters, the descriptions aren't always what they seem because it is translated from a different language into English. So don't be afraid to look in the wiki, the Wikipedia that we have for Produmex WMS. And if you don't know where that is, that would be the wiki.produmex.name. As you take a look, Produmex WMS, and there's a lot of information. It's probably the most complete documentation I've seen for a product in the Business One channel itself. So inside each and every one of the add-on screens within SAP Business One, there's definition. There's functional guides for each one of the workflows, or as they're called, flows within the system. So cycle counting, the moves, we have production, you have picking flows. So you can see there's a whole lot of information. Very complete, very well explained. So if you have a question on any of the parameters that you see within the organizational structure as you're trying to set this up, then that's a great resource for you. So as we take a look again, so I have some information here. So when I'm setting the system up, I'm going to require the database username. This would be the SQL Server or the HANA Server username, the relevant password, and then what license server name you've placed the Produmex license server on. Typically, that's going to be the same license server as you're installing SAP Business One on. As we look at the defaults, we have some output definitions. So there are a number of reports that are delivered with the system, including a goods receipt label, a shipping label, and an item label. So you can go ahead and refer to those reports, and we'll talk a little bit about report definition in just a couple of minutes. But you can go ahead and set your default formats of crystal reports, which are delivered with the system to be printed at various times throughout the process. Additional expenses generator. So obviously, as I'm generating the additional expenses on either my my goods receipt delivery note, my outward bound sales order delivery note, I have an ability to generate expenses based upon different algorithms. And then I have the concept of quality statuses. And so as we take a look within Produmex, every, shall we say, lot of goods, and whether that be an item in a quantity that exists on a license plate, or whether that be a lot in the terms of a batch control lot or set of serial numbers, can have a quality status associated with it. And so what we're doing here is just setting the default statuses so that when I receive something, if I have not defined specifically on the item master what my quality status should be, it's going to default to this. Again, released quality status. So if I'm bringing things in quarantine and I release them, the default is going to be that it gets released. If I'm bringing products back from a sales return, it's going to automatically put them on a quarantine quality status. And then when I do a quality status for cycle counting, if I'm going to bring any product in based on that, in other words, do a kind of a miscellaneous goods receipt, I can go ahead and set a quality status for that, as well as for returnable items. Now, that's all well and good, but how do we get those quality statuses? So again, within this whole, shall we say, structure, we have a lot of definition that goes on. And if I take a look then at the quality status list, I can create quality statuses. Each one of those quality statuses can have definitions of what's allowed to be done with inventory or stock that's sitting on that particular inventory status. Well, if I look at something that's blocked or quarantined, let's say quarantined, we're seeing that I can't ship it, I can't pick it, I can't use it for production. None of my logistics operations are allowed for that. And I also, further to that, say when something is quarantined, there is only a certain number of quality statuses that it can go to. So if it's quarantined, I can either reject it or I can release it. Those are the two things that I can do. And furthermore, if I want to go ahead and ask for a reason using a set of reason codes, I can go ahead and say when I change it from quarantined to rejected, I'm going to be prompted for a reason. And those reason codes are set up here. And then you can create a whole list of reason codes that then can be associated with a number of the different logistics processes within the WMS to be able to go ahead and give people acceptable lists of reasons to be flagged on particular transactions. And we'll delve into that in just a couple of minutes as we start taking a look at extension parameters. So as you can see, there's a lot of interrelated setup that happens. So when you're first setting up WMS, Produmex WMS, some of the things that you're going to want to do is first go in and create your quality statuses. You're going to want to set up your list of reasons that you may have, because those then are going to flow into some of the defaults that I'm going to go ahead and set when I'm going ahead and setting the system up. Now, we're all familiar in the WMS world with something called license plates. License plates really are in the GS1 world where Produmex lives. So Produmex is a GS1 standard compliant system, meaning that all of the SSCCs, which is a serialized shipping container code, that's what that stands for, it all adheres, shall we say, to or complies with the GS1 standard. So as I take a look at my license plate numbers and as they're being generated as SSCCs, I can see that I have a starting range and an ending range. Typically, with a manufacturing company or a distribution company, they're going to have their own, if they're using GS1 and they adhere and are part of the GS1 standard, they will have their own kind of manufacturer numbers and sequence numbers that they apply to and register for within the GS1 standard. So again, as I'm receiving goods, if I'm receiving them onto a license plate, or an SSCC, commonly known, there's really three terms you'll hear interchanged: license plate, SSCC. An SSCC could be a pallet, it could be a case, it could be a tote. It's a unique identifier for a set of inventory in the system. You will also hear it referred to as a logistics unit identifier. So all three of those terms can really be used interchangeably as you're talking to a customer or a prospect about the system. As we further go along, as we take a look at production, as many people know, there used to be a solution called Produmex Manufacturing, as well as Produmex WMS. The two used to be very tightly integrated. Now we are no longer selling the Produmex Manufacturing, but rather relying on the SAP Business One standard production functionality. In this case, what this is telling me that unless otherwise I designate on an item master what the production status is of something coming out of production, it's going to default to this. So we've covered production, we've covered SSCC. Reports would be the next area. One of the biggest features that I find very handy in terms of being able to configure within Produmex WMS is the ability to use pre-delivered reports, which are typically delivered in the install files. So if I take a look quickly at this particular virtual machine that I'm on, and I can get it to actually work right here. So basically, in this machine, I have in my source area, I have my Produmex WMS set up. Now I don't have that extracted, but inside of this is the reports folder, which you can then go ahead and move out to your own area on the system. So I have it in just the C drive Produmex reports. And then I have a list of these default reports which were delivered with the system. So you can see there's a lot of default reports, and where those get used is when we're defining reports. So when we have the reports tab within the organizational structure, I have the report path, so this is pointing to that report path, and then it's telling the system what report you're going to run. So in this case, this is a goods receipt label. It's going to print every time I do a receiving. Anytime I create, it's actually flagged to print every time a inbound goods receipt delivery note is created. And what that's going to do is print the good receipts label. And so there's just some additional. It's saying that it's a crystal report. It's giving it a name, which is a descriptive name, giving it a page size, what the orientation is. It's saying what kind of a report it is. And you'll see in just a minute how we tie this into different print events. So there's a list of different types of reports that are in the system. And this has to do with a hook into the workflow as to when and where things will go ahead and print. And then we actually name the report name itself. So if you take a look, the system's going to go and find this goods receipt label in the path of C: Produmex reports, and then look for this crystal report to run. Now, how do things get triggered within the system? I can go ahead and look at the print events. And here in the print events, I have the ability to, based upon a number of different logistics processes that occur within the WMS, meaning triggers, I can go ahead and print a given report. So if I want to print a new pallet label or a new logistics unit label, then I would click on the event is the reception, new logics reviewed unit identifier. What report do I want to print? So this is the report which I've defined in the reports folder here. So there's my goods receipt label. You can see that. And then I can say the number of copies, and then I can apply filters. And there's different filters that you can put, whether you want it as a document line, whether it's based on the logistics unit ID. So this basically has to do with what the crystal report filter is. In general, you would take the filter that is just defaulted when you actually select the event. So that's the event is actually driving which filter you should use. It would only be in an advanced configuration scenario where you would go ahead and want to play with those filters. So again, as we take a look at this use scenario, I'm saying that every time I create a new SSCC, which we saw in the receiving area, I'm going to go and print a new logistics unit label. That label is defined in the crystal report layout associated with the goods receipt label, and I'm saying the number of copies I want. So again, a lot of this stuff hangs together. We can also set up zone types. So you can have different types of zones, and that will come into play as we get a little deeper into the definition here of what a zone is. Page sizes for purposes of reports. We've talked about quality statuses. We've talked about reasons. 3PL invoicing is a whole nother topic, which we really haven't had the need to get into. Again, if there's need for that, I would go back to development or Gilles to be able to see how that might be used. Again, your wiki document is a great source or asset for being able to find things like that out. And then I have a history of my configuration, the various workflows. So there are a lot of different workflows that are in the system. So as I'm on my handheld unit, as you've seen in other videos, and actually as we go ahead and we can log on to that handheld unit. But as we take a look at the various different flows, that's where a lot of logic, if it were to need to be modified, the logic of a workflow, which we tend to try to not do much of, then those customizations or modifications would be added to these scripts, and those scripts would then be compiled into the handheld application. So as we take a look at the configurability, really some advanced configuration could be accomplished in the workflows. And if we wanted to take a look at editing a script of one of the workflows, I could go ahead and do that. There's a number of different types of scripting and XML type scripting and formatting that you can do to accomplish some of the changes to some of the workflows within the system. Again, this is a very deep, very broad product. You could spend an hour talking about the different workflows. But as I have looked at this system and worked at it for a year, you're essentially really sticking in the areas of the first 5 or 6 tabs. So you have your general, you have your defaults, you have SSCC, production, reports, print events, zone types, quality statuses, and reasons. If you can understand all of that and be able to kind of weave that into the configuration of what you're doing for demonstrations and implementations, then you're off to a good start, because that really puts in place a lot of the best practices, standard operating procedures that are delivered with Produmex WMS. As we look at really the last tab in this area, we have what are called the extension parameters. And this is really what I'll call the secret sauce to the system. This is where you have the ultimate ability to be able to configure the behavior of of what appears on a screen within the handheld, what's required on a scan, and what ultimately is going to be on the documents as we post them into SAP Business One. An example of this. So if I were to take a look at the purchase delivery note generator, okay? So when I'm doing a purchase order receipt, it's going to go ahead and run this purchase delivery generator. Here I have a number of different parameters and rules. So do I want to allow them to enter a reason on the purchase delivery? So do I want to require one of my reason codes to be entered? Do I want to allow the quantity entered to exceed the ordered quantity? Do I want to select a batch or enter a batch? Do I want to ask the user if they want to print labels as part of the receipt? Do I want to auto reserve the stock when purchase order is linked to a sales order? This has to do with cross-docking. Do I want to check data in UDFs from a purchase order line? So are there different edits that you want to have on UDFs within the purchase order? When I do reserve stock that's associated with a purchase order, what type of pick list do I want to generate? Do I want to group the purchase delivery? In this case, it's a matter of whether it's going to enter a goods receipt for each line that I receive, or whether it's going to do it on as a grouped delivery note. So if I take a look at, do I want to receive all items in one purchase delivery? Do I want to receive on a location instead of a dock? In other words, if I want to receive everything onto a dock location, which I've defined over here, I can say receive on the dock. So it has to go into the dock. If I want to allow somebody to put it away right away, I would just click on receive on location instead of dock. That would allow me to select where I want to put the product. So there are a number. I'm not going to go in detail through every one of the checkboxes, but that gives you an idea of the type of control that you have in these different delivery extension parameters. There really would be called configuration parameters would be better. So as I take a look, so that's the purchase one. So if I want to look at my pick list controller, here's another one. I have 3 different types of picking. I have ad hoc picking. Here's a set of rules on that. I have general picking. I have a set of rules on that. I have multiple picking, set of rules on that. And then I have a number of different ones that apply to all of the different types of picking. Again, these are as people want to have control and want to control what gets scanned, whether they're going to scan the location, confirmation scan when they go pick the product or not, that can be controlled here. If we're using multiple packaging types, such as a case, pallet, inner pack, outer pack, do I want to auto select those? Do I want to auto select the movable location? You can have movable locations such as carts or totes, what have you, that you're picking into. So do you want to allow picking from bulk locations? Do you want them to use a pallet? Do you want to consolidate items to pick? All different types of rules. And again, what you want to do is, as you're taking a look at the various demo scenarios that you may need to go through, you may, to meet a specific requirement, you may need to delve into some of these extension parameters to be able to configure them. Again, your best resource for figuring out what each one of these settings is going back into the Wikipedia to be able to find that. So that really covers off the overall at a company level. These again are rules that adhere to the entire company. And then as you get down into each different warehouse, you have the ability to go ahead and define what we call the organizational structure associated with that company. And in the spirit of being able to kind of break these videos up into smaller digestible bites, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this configuration topic at this point, and then we'll start the next video with taking a look at what we can accomplish with the organizational structure entities, which become the warehouse and the zones, etc., beneath it. So stay tuned. The next video will start in just a moment.